Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, speaking to you from the pulpit of our synagogue. At this time, I'd like to talk to you about the following subject: a portable sanctuary, a message for our time. And I'm speaking about the Ark of the Covenant. What can we say about its meaning for us today? It was critically important in the Israelite religion as described in the Bible. About a third of the book of Exodus is devoted to the details of its construction. We are now reading those chapters in our Shabbat lectionary. According to the biblical account in the book of 1 Kings, the ark was housed in Solomon's temple once that temple was built in the 900s before the Common Era. Was the ark destroyed when the Babylonians burned the house of God in the year 586 before the Common Era? Probably, but not certainly. A Jewish tradition from the Second Temple era, 500 years later, 600 years later. This tradition offers the theory that the ark is extant, but that its whereabouts are unknown, and that such is God's will. I'll quote from the second book of Maccabees, chapter 2, verses 4 through 8, written about the year 100 before the Common Era. And this is what we read there. The records show that it was the prophet Jeremiah who, prompted by a divine message, gave orders that the tent of meeting and the ark should go with him. That is to say, when he was fleeing the Babylonian army in the direction of Egypt. Then he went away to the mountain from the top of which Moses saw God's promised land. That would be Har Nevo, Mount Nebo, modern-day southwestern Jordan, just on the east side of the Dead Sea. When he reached the mountain, Jeremiah found a cave dwelling. He carried the tent, the ark, and the incense altar into it, and then blocked up the entrance. The place shall remain unknown, he said, until God finally gathers his people together and shows mercy to them. Other faith communities, other views. The Lemba people of Zimbabwe and South Africa claim a Jewish connection, and some genetic studies support their contention. Their tradition holds that the ark came to them, perhaps after a sojourn in Yemen. They claim that their ancestors carried it south and hid it in a cave sacred to their faith. They also claim that the ark spontaneously self-destructed, no doubt a proof in their eyes of its authenticity. Lemba priests collected its remains, it is said, and constructed a new one. This replica is in the Museum of Human Science in Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church in Aksum, the Tigray region of Ethiopia, holds a chest that the faithful of that communion claim is the very ark described in the Bible. Professor Edward Uhlendorf, a scholar in the field of Ethiopian studies, was stationed there in 1941, serving in the British Army. He examined the chest, and he declared it to be of medieval or late medieval provenance. Just parenthetically, that's similar to the claim that some people make about the Shroud of Turin, that it's also from the Middle Ages. Tragically, the ark in Ethiopia may have been part of the goal of the Eritrean militants who attacked the church. The church is the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum, Ethiopia. It was attacked in December 2020. Very sadly, the militants who attacked it massacred, it is reported, 750 people who'd fled to the church to take sanctuary. Very sad. Then, of course, there are those who swear by film rather than faith and privilege that over fact. For such diehards, there can be no quibbles. The Ark is in a secret CIA warehouse in Virginia. After all, that's what is shown in the 1981 Spielberg film, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Enough said. For me, the Ark is important not as a relic, not as a secret weapon, nor as a material asset of inestimable value, but precisely for the main idea of the Ark, which seems to be lost in all of these claims that it is resting in this place or that. The importance of the Ark specifically is that it was portable. The Israelites in the book of Exodus, having left Egypt, were nomads. They spent a generation on the move through the Sinai, staying in an oasis for shorter or longer periods of time, but living in tents, not in permanent structures. The intention was to be able to move. They no longer resided in the land of Goshen in Egypt. In Egypt, they had seen plenty of pagan temples firmly rooted in the sands. But those temples could not serve the needs of this new people, since it was a people on the move. Ironically, until a century ago, the Bedouins of the Negev and of the Sinai were closer in lifestyle to the biblical Israelites than were the city-dwelling Jews of Baghdad or Berlin. 3 years ago, everything I've told you now might have been interesting, but not tremendously relevant. I submit that today it is more relevant than ever, and that is because of COVID. We still regard our bricks and mortars buildings as our community centers, but actually they've been far less so since March 2020. Our own congregation is typical of non-Orthodox Jewish life in this regard. Our in-person daily worship, our daily chapel, had struggled for years. Some evenings we would get 10 adults, a minyan, which means a quorum for public worship. Other evenings we would not. But since we, quote, went virtual in March of 2020, and since we began to hold services by means of the Zoom video conferencing channel, we have not failed to hold our services punctually and with an adequate and sometimes an ample attendance. Moreover, the limits of geography have ceased to matter. On any given night, we may have worshipers joined together across time zones and across national borders. From Canada to California, we are one community. And not because we physically go into one building, but because we are together in the important ways, emotionally, psychologically. People rejoice to be together, in some sense at least, and they serve the Lord in gladness. Isn't that what prayer is supposed to do? COVID may be here to stay. Although it may decline in virulence over time, that would track the record of certain other major diseases. Does that mean a return to the centrality of a fixed location for sanctuary? for worship? I believe that for certain purposes we will want to have a fixed sanctuary, but the idea of a sanctuary that can still serve us wherever we may be and to wherever we may move, I think that idea is with us to stay. My two sets of grandparents, born in the tiny villages of Eastern Europe, lived their adult lives in Baltimore and in the Bronx. If you drive through their, quote, old neighborhoods today, you can see one former synagogue building after another. Some of those buildings are functioning as churches. Others have been fully desacralized. The old theme of the wandering Jew, a product of historical oppression, seems to have been refashioned into the 20th century tragedy of white flight from once thriving cities. Perhaps it is bad stewardship of the material resources of a generation to build a series of attractive multi-million-dollar buildings and complexes. Perhaps all that money put into beautiful atria and Jerusalem's stone-lined corridors should have gone into Jewish education, into cultural programming, and into legitimate social welfare needs. The Ark of the Covenant, think of it this way, a non-localized sanctuary. Not because the Ark itself didn't have one place, but because it was on the move. The Ark of the Covenant, a non-localized sanctuary, I believe that it is an idea whose time has come again. Shalom.